to 22333. And then the second one is you can also tweet it out with the hashtag IST Startup. And third and finally, you can just do the old-fashioned raise your hand. This will be, this classroom is actually equipped with microphones in the ceiling. So if you see next to your computer, you're going to press and hold the button as you ask your question. It will pick up your question, and it will send it out to the speaker. So again, this session will be filmed and streamed online. So if you're not comfortable being photographed or filmed, please either move to the back or come see me after the session. And finally, let me just give a quick introduction for our speaker. Keith Deaven has co-founded and is the CEO of MediaBarn, a company that specializes in user experience research, design, and staff augmentation. He began his interactive career at American Online as executive director of the producer team in the AOL studio. Keith earned a bachelor's degree of science in labor and industrial relations from Penn State University, where he continues to assist the College of IST. As a speaker in project management and entrepreneurship, Keith proudly serves as the president of the board of Uplifting Athletes, a national nonprofit organization, and enjoys traveling, cooking, and playing bass in a band. So without further ado, I present Keith Deaven.
Thank you, Bryce. Appreciate it. So in addition to me today, you're actually all very lucky to also have Sarah Mastro with us, and we'll talk about ourselves in just a second. But I just wanted to also let you know that today you guys are in for hopefully a fun little treat. We had the good fortune of being selected to help IST redesign the website that you guys may have looked at as before you were students, or maybe even you use now. So today we're going to, oh, that's embarrassing. How about that? Didn't somebody say turn off your cell phones? Uh-huh. Noted. Thomas on my list. So you guys are going to get a chance today to see something that only a few people have seen so far, and that is the new redesign of the IST website, which is very exciting. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about user experience, why user experience is important, and then we're going to use the case study of the project work that we did on the IST website to go through the process that we go through as a creative agency, so that you guys get a sort of a first-hand look at what the process is for designing world-class websites. So, Sarah, go ahead.
Good morning. As Keith said, my name is Sarah Mastro. I work with Keith at MediaBarn. Back in the day, I attended the other state university, the Florida State University. After that, I went to graduate school at Savannah College of Art and Design, where I got my graduate degree in computer art and animation. On the long path, it led me into usability, user experience, research, design, and before joining MediaBarn, I was at several companies. Most recently, I was the director of user experience for Discovery Channel, working with them on all their online products. I've been at MediaBarn now for 8 years, very long time. We've had the privilege of working on a variety of projects, and as Keith mentioned, one of them is the actual IST website, which has been a lot of fun to work on. And we're going to take you through that, in addition to just sort of taking you through the process of what a typical user experience workflow and process would be like when we do that at MediaBarn. Am I speaking loud enough? Can everyone hear me? I have a pretty loud voice, so hopefully that's good. All right. And we also changed the title of the session, by the way, because we wanted to. There we go. We already said that. So Keith, do you want to talk a little bit about MediaBarn?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
So we started MediaBarn in 2004. As Bryce mentioned, I started my interactive career at a small company then called America Online. I started there in 1993 and spent 10 years there kind of helping them grow. I'm sure it was all before your time. At one point, AOL was actually fairly cool. It's taken a shot since then. But
did I actually see that they're giving away, AIM's going away? Did I actually see that?
I heard that. Yep. The first instant messenger.
Who here uses AIM anymore?
Yep.
Does anyone use AIM? All right, fine, whatever.
Well, my name's on that patent, so thanks a lot for that. Appreciate it. Anyway, and at AOL, it was a great experience because at the time, AOL ran its own proprietary system, and we had a sort of closed wall, all-inclusive experience where we provide our members with information on personal finance and entertainment and games and you name it, we ran the gamut. So it was a great place to grow up in the interactive space because I got my hands on a little bit of everything. And then since then, we started MediaBarn first as a creative agency. Started it again in 2004. and very quickly added a staff augmentation portion to it. So if you all are familiar with staffing agencies, we actually staff folks in the DC area, visual designers, HTML specialists, things like that. So we actually help get people jobs through a temp agency that is really solely dedicated to what we still kind of call, using a dated term, the interactive space. And then just about 5-6 years ago, we spun up a user experience lab. And in the lab, we do 2 main types of testing. And if you happened to be here last year, we talked about the testing types. We do focus groups. If you're familiar with those, we kind of get a group of people in a room and get their opinions on branding, on product features, on different types of things that, a target market can inform our clients on. So are our clients on the right direction with a product development path? Are they in the right direction with branding? Things like that. So focus groups as well as usability testing. And usability testing is one-on-one testing to make sure that people can actually use a product that has been put into the market or is still under development. And it's actually fascinating. We have a setup very similar to this. I'm not sure who's behind the mirror here, but we have a setup where on one side of a two-way mirror, you can look through and observe people using your product. And it is, for anyone who is interested in being an entrepreneur, I can't stress enough how important user research is. We made this point last year. I think it was Steve Jobs was kind of down on user research because he felt like you wanted to take the market and show them things that they don't know they want yet, which is brilliant if you're Steve Jobs, who was one in the last, 20 billion people on the planet or something like that. Otherwise, talk to your users and learn what they want, learn what they're going to use so that you don't waste money on your product down the line building something that you think is the best thing ever and your target market doesn't care about. So anyway, we'll get on that soapbox again in a little bit during the presentation, but I just had to get that in because it makes me crazy that how little people actually do user testing with what they want to put in the market. At any rate, our focus is on user experience and user-centered design. So in the last few years, the term UX has really kind of started to permeate the market. And if you guys have heard it, user experience, it's something that we have been doing for a long time, but is really kind of coming into its own in both the commercial space as well as in the federal space. And for those of you who are thinking about careers in the government, they have been notoriously behind in trends for what makes a good user experience, both for government to consumer, G2C, as well as working within itself. So if you're building tools for people inside the government to work on, user experience has been sorely lagging and is something that they're starting to spend a lot more time on.
So can we ask the audience on the definition of user experience? Everybody seems to have sort of their own variants. Is everybody familiar with the term user experience? So I'm curious to hear a couple definitions before you.
Sure, we just did this a few weeks ago
at
a conference.
So raise your hand or tweet it.
Anybody. What UX? What does UX mean?
What is UX to you? What does UX mean to you? Come on, someone.
Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
I'd say how the user interacts.
All right.
I'd say it's how the user interacts with your product and kind of gets the information that you're trying to give them.
Yeah. Anyone else have a similar or variance on that definition?
Maybe their likelihood to return to the product, or
Okay.
how happy they were with it.
Yep. Yep.
There's no wrong answer, by the way. We
Yeah,
had
we're
a group of about 100 UX professionals in a room about a month ago, and we did not get one consistent answer. So there's no wrong answer when it comes to this so far. We're gonna try to change that.
Did you want to talk about the good gov a little bit more? Or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just real quick, one of the things that we have undertaken as somebody who works peripherally with the government, we've done a few government subcontracts. Amazingly, no one inside the federal government, we're in Arlington, so we're just outside of DC. Amazingly, no one inside the federal government yet has really decided to put forth a set of best practices when it comes to defining a user experience. It happens all over the place in commercial space. There are experts out in the field who write Steve Krug,
Nielsen Norman
Group. There's people out there who have taken the forefront of defining what user experience is and what are best practices. But no one's done that inside the government. And the government's a different space in terms of what they're trying to do, because they're trying to inform an entire country on what's happening inside the federal government, as well as creating their own tool sets. So we've teamed up with a few folks inside the government, some folks that work in the digital service at the White House, a few other places to really establish what are usability best practices when you're building a federal government web property, and we're also extending that into tool sets. So again, anybody that's interested in internships or looking at federal work, especially if you're going to be working on interactive products, and that could be installed software. That doesn't have to be just web services. That can be anything. Think about the user experience and what we're talking about here today, because a change is going to be coming inside the federal government about the consideration that user experience gets. It has picked up an incredible amount of momentum in 3 months, which in government time is like 2 seconds. So it's really taken on a life of its own, and we're really excited about it because we think it's going to make a real difference with how our government talks to us as taxpayers, as constituents, and as customers of what the government has to offer. So it's very cool. goodgovux.com. If you have any questions about it, it's just the brochure site right now, but we'll be putting a lot of information up there pretty soon.
Great. Okay. All right, so moving on. So yes, so what is UX? For the general definition, we're saying it includes all areas of an end user's interaction with a product, service, device. How does a user feel when they interact with it? Is it easy? Are they frustrated? Are they happy? Do they want to come back to the site? So that's sort of how we define it. But as Keith said, there's no specific right definition. If you Google it, you'll have 100 different definitions from whatever agency of the day is sort of promoting that. But we use this as sort of a hard rule at MediaBarn, where everything we do, we think about the user. Of course, business rules are important, but for us, it's the user is our #1 focus. Why is it important? It doesn't matter how nice something looks, how pretty it is. If your users can't use it or don't enjoy it, you've failed. So it could be the coolest looking thing you've ever seen, but if your users can't navigate it, we see this all the time at MediaBarn. We actually, as Keith mentioned, we have a lab. In our lab, we test different products and different audiences from 3-year-olds to 65-year-olds. And whatever product we test, it could be the coolest looking thing. If they can't get to the tasks that they need to get to or get to the information, it doesn't matter how great it looks or the new super code that it's used on the back end, it failed. So you need to keep that in mind, that that is something really relevant. We've had clients come in with the coolest new looking games for kids, and we put it in front of kids, and they have no idea what to do with it. The same thing with the older groups. They, great new concept. They get sat in the seat for the usability testing, and they're completely lost. So just something to be mindful of. What we're going to be talking today about, while we talk about the process, as Keith mentioned, is the actual IST website. So knowing that, we want to take you through the process of creating a successful UX using that as sort of guidelines. So with that, we have our sort of process that we use, and most agencies do. It's nothing, the process is not new. It's just how detailed you get in that process that matters. So the first part of the process is research. As Keith mentioned before, listening to your users, observing your users, competitive analysis. This is all goes into when you're doing a new product, a new website, a new app. Just research, research, research. If you don't have the funds or the means to do formal usability tests, grab your friends, grab your family, sit down with someone, do some research, grab some strangers in a coffee shop. Doesn't matter, just test it, because when you design just inside your box, it's not going to be as successful. So we'll talk a little bit more about research in a moment. Information architecture we'll talk about, and that is basically the structure of the site. User interface, the blueprint, visual design, and development. So let's talk about the process a little bit. So UX in action. This, you might recognize, is the IST site. Here it was before. It is as is now. We're not live yet. We did focus group testing on this, and I assume many of you, how many of you, actually curious, when you were making a decision to come here, how many of you used the website to help in your decision?
At least reading, looking for some information, trying to figure out. It might not have influenced your decision, but did you at least do some research through the website? Okay,
and did it help you? Yeah.
That's about what we found. We got one of those. Yeah.
So what we did was we got a group of students, high school students who were planning on going to undergrad, and college students who were planning on going to graduate school. They weren't necessarily planning to come here, but they were in this sort of field, and they were looking for schools similar to IST. And we did a focus group with them. We showed them many sites, but also we talked about what they wanted on the site. And what we found was with this site, there was a few problems. Number one, it was a little cluttered. People weren't sure where to go and how it fit them, right? You're a new student or a prospective student. What do I do first? How do I find out? Something that we found that was actually very interesting was that prospective students wanted to find out what happens to graduating students. How successful are they? What is the turnout? Where are they going to work? What companies are they working for?
Or their parents wanted to know that too.
Yeah.
Probably more so.
Exactly.
My kid
Is
gonna
it
get a
easy
job?
for them to find a job? Is it easy for them to make contacts? What is the success rate of graduating from IST? That was huge across the board, whether it was the high school students or the college students. The other was financial aid, student life, the culture here, things like that, that people who were not familiar with the school wanted to find out. What we found when we showed, and this was not, again, not the only site we showed, that they just didn't know where to go. The other thing was about faculty, contacting faculty. How easy was it to contact faculty, get information about them? So we had a lot of good information, a lot of good feedback. What we also did to help us, we did interviews with staff here to find out what they needed from the website.
So my question to you was, how much in alignment was what the staff wanted versus what the prospective user wanted, and were we able to identify some gaps in that?
That's a very good question, Keith.
Why, thank you.
It was somewhat aligned. I would say it was aligned in the areas that they all wanted to simplify the experience. They all wanted to make an easier pathway. The faculty wanted to have a little more robust information about the projects and the funding and the special projects and the, that you can get involved with and the partnerships, whereas the students were not as concerned with that. So there was a little disconnect in that, but everything else, everybody had the same end goal of get the students the information they need quickly so that they can get here for an on-site visit and talk to the right people. So research. We did the focus groups. We talked about that. We talked about how it should be designed. Again, once we got here and we met in a room, we put all the features up on a wall, sticky notes, put them all on a wall with all the different features, all the different areas of the site, and prioritized what are the most important for each user group, because we know that the only user group is not prospective students. It's current students, it's alumni, it's faculty, it's parents. So having all of those groups, putting them all on a wall, talking about each feature set of what they all need, organizing as such, and then deciding who your top user groups are and making sure that the hierarchy that we're going to present is going to make sense for that user group. And then we'll get into, of course, the usability testing in a minute. Information architecture. Is everybody familiar with this term, information architecture? I assume, yeah. So information architecture is obviously the basis for your whole design. The organization, the flow your users will need to take. Sometimes there's more than one pathway and touch points to get to that information, but you need to make sure that that is set before you design it. And I want to show you, and good luck to me for trying to do this. Alt-tab? Yeah? All right. We're doing this.
So information architecture, just real quick if people aren't clear on it, it's a good visual way to sort of lay out the sitemap and to show you navigation paths from the main page all the way down through the sub-navigation and into content pages and things like that. So information architecture is really the flow patterns for how people are going to interact
for every single
through
page,
the page
and the way every single page is going to need to be structured. Development needs this too, obviously. You can't build a site without knowing what the structure is going to be or the taxonomy. So it's something that's important not only to the information architect and the visual designer, but the development as well. And this is something that we did for this project. So table of contents, you can see there's a lot. We talked about the primary navigation, and we build upon that. And you can see just every section is thought through for every path and numbered so we can easily track it. But it's a pretty big document, and we just go through every section to make sure that when we're laying it out, it's really easy to design and that we've thought through every possible touch point and flow.
And it's worth mentioning, what we're showing you here is actually what we delivered to the School of IST. So
yeah, this
we're
is
showing
the
you
information architecture.
Right, we're showing you actual things that as a working design studio, this is our work output. This is what we produce. And if you go work at a design studio, these are the types of things that you would be working on and actually delivering to your clients.
So, and it's a big site, so it's a big document, 68 pages. Not every site we work on is is this large, obviously, but every site will have an information architecture that we'll start with before we build. We don't always do it. Sometimes the client takes it on, but more often than not, since that's what our expertise is in, we'll take it on, or at least help to do it. So what we did next was the wireframes. So UI design, user interface design, where the information architecture comes to life. It's the layout. Just like an architect has blueprints, this is sort of the blueprint for the site. Laying out all the pages to be easy to navigate, keeping things clear, directing our audience. A lot of times what we'll do at this stage when we've got the wires, and I'll show you a little bit more of them, is we'll test it. We'll string together a quick HTML prototype. So what we do in that situation to test the prototype is we have users come in, and again, the target audiences, in this case it would be prospective students, and we'd have them go through the clickable prototype and just give them tasks to make sure in this stage we don't care so much about the visual design, obviously, we haven't done that yet. What we do care about is the naming conventions. Do the navigation names make sense? Did the way we structured the content under each navigation name make sense? Is it easy to get to those tasks? These are all the things that we want to catch early on before we go into visual design, before we go into development, so that you save time, you save money, and you sort of know what your pain points are before you start down that road. So that's how we did that, and just to give you an idea of what that looks like. There we go. So these are the wireframes, and as Keith said, these are the actual wireframes that we delivered for the school. And you can see here, each page, the header is laid out, how the navigation and the flyout menu is going to work is laid out, the footer, and then the main pages. So you can see each main page. And we just build it all. You know, interior pages, you don't usually have to wire out every single one if you're going to follow a template, but it's good to do one or two. And we laid the groundwork for what was going to be the design.
And it's worth noting that, again, this doesn't necessarily just pertain to websites or things like that. This can also be applied to installed applications or anything else where users are going to interact with the product. This wireframing phase is huge. In
That's
fact,
actually a good point to make. We do a lot of interactive games as well, mostly educational games. And when you do that, one thing that's important as well is while the name can be called storyboard instead of a wireframe, it's still equally as important to flesh it out like this before you dig deep. So you sort of make these wireframing paths or storyboard paths to make sure that you get the interactivity right and it's laid out and that you can see it, you know, just like an animation storyboard, but in this case, to create that. We do a lot of higher educational games and interactives, and this is the exact process we take as well. It's just we make notes to show where the interaction is going to be.
Sure. It's worth noting that the cost savings that you get on a website here is significant if you're not building code yet and you don't build something wrong and you figure it out here. But that multiplies when you start talking about when you're building hardcore applications, you're building installed applications, games, because the development tail on a project like that is far bigger than what it is on a website here. So the wireframing almost becomes more important in the application world because the amount of development effort that goes into an installed application is typically a lot bigger than a standard website.
Yeah. It is interesting to note, though, that not everybody understands the wireframe process, and we have shown these sometimes to clients. They'll be like, "It's too gray. We want to add some color to it. We don't like that for our design." So that happens sometimes. Are there any questions so far? Probably not.
Oh, go ahead. Sure. The question is, what tool do we use to create the wireframes?
Yeah. So we use a variety. A lot of times we use Illustrator, actually. A lot of times we've used a lot of sort of the out-of-the-box new interactive tools. Axure is one that we use. But for these kind of really high fidelity, almost designed wires, we usually use Illustrator or InDesign.
But that's a good question because there are a lot of
so many
prototyping tools out there
now,
now
yeah.
that are quick and easy, and you can get the same effect.
Yep.
Go ahead, sure.
So what's the difference between the focus group and the normal interview?
Great question. So with a focus group, what you want to do is it's a group. It's actually a group. So you get 8 to 10 people is sort of the maximum amount we recommend. You sit them in a room, and you talk to them about a concept. You talk to them about websites. You talk to them about ideas, and they all sit around and we talk. With interviews, it's one-on-one. So that's the first thing, is we find with focus groups, people feed off of each other a little bit. which is why we like to max it out at 10. Too many is hard to manage. With one-on-ones, we'll typically do interviews, but most of the time with one-on-ones, we do that for usability testing, where we can sit them in front of an actual prototype or a website and have them go through it. With focus groups, you can't really do that because there's too many people. Now, the great thing about focus groups now is that you can do them remotely too. So we do this a lot when budgets are limited, or even when we want to get a really great geographical representation. So let's say we've got users from all over the country. We can do an online focus group where everybody gathers in a chat room and we show them concepts, or we chat about a concept and everybody types their responses, and it's just like a general chat room, but the transcripts are saved. And it's a really nice way to get a group of people, whether they're in California or Texas or Florida, to all talk together. So that works out well too. And people tend to be a little more honest when they're texting. You do have to pay them. So usually we have lists. We have generated lists from our past experiences, or the client will give us a list and say, here are our customers. In this case, I'll use this as an example. We knew that we needed potential students for grad school or college. So what we did was we sort of put a call out. We put a call out on Facebook. We had some other like touch points in the local universities, because DC has so many, Georgetown, GW. We sort of made postings in those, and you just go from there. You do have to pay them. The amount that you pay depends on the expertise. For example, if you're having a student, it's not probably going to be as much as, let's say, and we've had this, like a neurosurgeon, that we want to test a new website that's specific for them, because their time, you know, they're taking away from their practice, or an attorney where they're billable and things like that. So the more specific the recruit, for example, we've had recruits where we had to find someone who was going to buy a VW in the next 6 months, kind of a thing. And when you have something like that, that's very specific, was going to or had in the next 6 months. Couldn't be 2 years ago, it couldn't be maybe in the next 3 years, but specific recruits like that, also we need to pay a little bit more to get them to come in.
Typically, it's about 80 to 85 bucks for an hour session, either for an individual interview or for a focus group. If there's any market research firms in your hometowns, around here, anywhere, go sign up. A lot of times, places will have web form you can just fill out and say, yeah, I want to be tested. They may call you and ask you a couple questions, and if you qualify for the test, you're in. And it's amazing how many people we talk to and they think it's a scam. You know, they think we're trying to get some information out of them.
Yeah.
You actually go, you sit down for an hour, you learn about a product, you give your opinion, and you get 85 bucks. And it's actually a really good thing to do.
Now, by rule, we try not to use the same person within a year.
Right.
Because we don't want them to be a regular.
Yeah, it's not like giving plasma.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
Go ahead. The low fidelity to the clients?
Yeah, we have.
Yep.
You mean like a wireframe? Yeah, we do.
And typically, it doesn't even get to this point before we show them. We'll show them low fidelity before we take the time to go to the high fidelity. We'll, sometimes it's even sketches.
Yeah, that's correct. We will. And it depends on the client, too, because a lot of clients that we have, like, for example, here, the clients are savvier. They understand the process. They understand the wireframes. They understand what's going to happen. We have some clients that are not as familiar, so sometimes we'll give them a little more of a designed version so that they really can start to picture it to help them out in their education.
So if they do not understand the process, do you describe the process that, hey, we have to send you a low fidelity prototyper?
Yeah, we definitely will. Yep, we'll talk them through that. And again, the savviness of the client really will dictate, how often we will go through that with them. The sort of catch-22 with having someone that doesn't understand a wireframe is that if you go right to the colors, if you go right to design, they might not also understand that that's just a sketch, and then they'll get fixated on the colors and the design as opposed to what we need them to focus on, which is the layout. So a lot of times with clients who aren't as savvy, the less fidelity is almost better because they don't get caught up in, I don't like that blue, or I don't like that green. All they have to comment on is the fidelity of the mock-up, which we can argue away right away. And then they get right to the layout.
The layout, the naming of the navigation, where the navigation is. Yeah, we don't like to imply any design at this phase because, like he said, we don't want them to get hung up on it.
It's hard to back out of that.
And then they focus. Even,
once you show any kind of fidelity on a mock-up, it gets a lot harder to back out of it with the client.
Yeah, I mean, even this, to be honest, this is even risky because with this, and again, the client here was savvier, so they got it, but like even having a silhouette here.
They shouldn't have a tie on.
That's a risky one.
We get comments like that. They'll look at this and, you know, it's clip art, and they, you know, they're commenting on it.
It's a graduate student, Keith. Graduate students wear ties.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hi. Sure.
Sure. So the question is on usability testing, a typical sample size to get an adequate sort of reading or an accurate measurement is 5. That's the question, and have we found that? Typically, yeah, it is. We'll test 8 people, and usually by 5, we found 80 to 90% of the issues. So you get to a point where you get a diminishing return to pay the participant, to pay the facility, to pay the moderator. We usually do 8 in any kind of demographic, so that we're sure we catch it. But you absolutely get a diminishing return, and that's been proven over and over again in terms of statistical relevance, is I guess what they call it. Do you have anything to add to that? I mean, that's exactly right. And going back to the less savvy clients, they don't believe that. They think that you have to have quantitative data, you have to have big numbers of people to find usability problems, when in fact usability problems make themselves pretty apparent pretty quickly if you're in the right target market.
Yeah, if you sit through one of these tests after about the 4th participant, you start hearing the same comments over and over again. Now, that's not to say after the 6th or 7th person you don't get an interesting nugget or two of something, some aha that you didn't think about or they did. But, and as Keith mentioned though, that's per demographic, right? So if you're testing the same site but with parents and with students, you want to do 6 to 8 of both groups because they use the site differently. So it's more per demographic and not total. But yes, you're exactly right about that. But regardless, like he said, we have had clients that have insisted on testing 14, 15, 16 people, and the second half just becomes like you could kind of write the notes yourself without watching the test. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, great. Oh, sure.
I don't know whether others have asked this question about like which research method do you prefer to use during like study?
Sure. So the question is, what method do we prefer during a study? And the answer to that is actually both. So in the beginning of the project, a focus group is more about what people's opinions are, how people react to a feature set, or how they react to a brand, and what they want, right? What their feelings are about the product or whatever it is you're talking to them about in a group setting, in a focus group. So that puts you on a path to say, okay, great, we talked about this feature set. They didn't want features 1, 5, and 7, but they do want the rest, so that's what we're going to go build. Then once we get it to this phase, then we sit them down one-on-one and do a usability test to make sure that the designs that we're implementing, they can actually go use. So that's when we put them down to say, okay, we're going to give you, 5 of the main tasks. We want you to register for the website. We want you to purchase an item. We want you to do whatever. And we have them walk through those tasks. And that's really targeted to their usability of the site itself.
Yeah.
So if that answers your question, at the beginning, we want to understand what they want and what their feelings are. Once we have the designs, we want to know if they can use it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, we recently worked with a startup. They had something in the market already, an app in the market. But they were ready for the next version, and they weren't sure. They had a list of 30 features that they were considering. So we did some focus groups to help them prioritize what would actually be worth their while from a build standpoint. So we listed all the features, we discussed it, and then the group went ahead and discussed and prioritized among themselves. And they took the top 3, and they went to go build those. Yeah.
I do want to stress, as an entrepreneur and talking to future entrepreneurs, you don't have to do your entire product roadmap by user testing. That's not what we're advocating, and that was kind of what I think Steve Jobs was getting at early on. You want to take your own ingenuity, and you want to take your own ideas, and you want to get them out there, and you want to innovate. It's just a good idea to run it by your user base so that you realize you're not completely off, or that they will use it. I mean, and depending on your budget, you don't want to go off and build 10 features that nobody's going to use. But you might want to slip in that one that you think is going to be really great, and all of a sudden the market reacts to it and you're good to go. So we don't want to advocate using research to dumb down your own innovation. It's just wise and smart to run your ideas by your users to see if they make sense and if people are going to adopt them or not. Still take the chance. If somebody doesn't react well to an idea that you have, and you feel strongly about it, take your shot. Just, you go into it at least informed.
Anything else? No? Great. All right, so that's UI. After that becomes the fun part of the visual design. And this is where everybody becomes a designer, right? Everybody's a designer. One thing to be cognizant of is your audience, keeping their tastes in mind. Example, if you're designing for children, don't make it feel too grown-up. If you're designing for adults, don't make it too childlike. If you're designing for a site that's targeted to men, don't make it too feminine. Things like that that you need to keep in mind. If you're designing for both men and women, you need to keep it somewhat neutral. So there's a lot to keep in mind from that, in addition to just personal preference and what might look nice. Making your links obvious, call to actions clear, just in a useful design. At this stage, we also test usually the visual design prototype. Again, it's mostly for navigation, but we usually do get feedback or opinions on what people think of the actual look of the site. The problem with when you do visual design is that design is always subjective. What one person thinks is the most beautiful designed site, somebody else could probably find fault with or find holes in. There's going to be always that case of it's not going to be perfect. If you give somebody show someone a site that's won all kinds of awards, there's always going to be someone who doesn't like it. So sometimes you have to take that with a grain of salt, the feedback, but you also have to make sure you're being mindful for your target audience. Photos are a big part of sites a lot of times. You want to make sure that the photos resonate with the users. You want to make sure that the photos don't seem too cheesy, too stock. You want to make sure that the photos really encapture what the site means. The same thing if you're doing iconography, if you're doing animation, if you're doing illustration, just thinking about that. Just don't slap on any clip art or any photos just to have it there. It all has to sort of work together. One of the things we did when we did this IST site is we obviously generated several designs for the school to think of. You can see that they're all similar in a way, right? Because they're all based on the same wireframes. And the wireframes and the layouts were already approved. So when we show the designs, there's not really any surprises. The wireframes that were approved had navigation here and content here, and that's pretty much what you get, is just like the wires. So you can see there's a lot of similarities based on the wires. They all have a main image. They all have the content the same. It's just when you get down here, it just gets a little bit different about how we translated it. The palette is obviously the palette because it's your brand, so you're not going to introduce something so crazy. But we had a few different variations on the wireframe to present, and these are some of the examples that we did show the school for them to choose from. So what we did from here was the client looked at these, decided what they liked and what they didn't like. For example, I can tell you that everybody loved this here, and remember we talked earlier about prospective students wanting to know sort of the success rate of the school and who's graduating, and what this is sort of showing you how many people are going to the school, how many people are students, how many people are getting placed. It's going to be that kind of a percentage thing. Something else that is very important is company logos of where people have gone to work after they left IST. That's something that's very relevant that people wanted to see. And then of course just easier navigation, right? When you get here, you can see obviously where you're going to go. But the imagery is kind of warm and compelling so that it makes you feel like this is kind of a cool place. The building is really awesome looking, so it takes a great picture, right? So something to lead with that. So we went with that with the visual design. Once we do the visual design, we go into development. We do the testing on the visual design, the prototypes. If we make any changes, it's based on usability. Perhaps when we did the visual design, some of the links or the buttons didn't translate as obvious as we thought they would. So we'll go back in based on the usability testing feedback, and we'll change those to make them pop or stand out more. Sometimes we'll find that maybe a section we really wanted to stand out on the home page isn't standing out enough the way we designed it. We'll do that as well. Sometimes we'll feel like the photos we chose are not resonating as well, and we'll swap those out. So there's a lot of things that go into, even when you're all the way down to visual design and you do that prototype testing, there's a lot of things that you can still go ahead and change. It's not as dramatic or drastic as the changes you need to make to the actual structure of the site, but there are usually some tweaks that we'll do.
I think it's worth noting too that at the UI design phase, at the research phase right up front, you want to include the people who are doing the site development. This isn't just about design. This is about designing things that can be built, that can be easily built, that are functional. So we believe very strongly that development should be involved the whole way along. So whoever's building this, should at least be consulting. Hopefully, they're also giving ideas at the wireframe phase, but they should be involved in the process the whole time. This isn't just, you know, here's a bunch of designs. Good luck building it.
Right.
The other thing is, and you know, I don't know if we talk about this at the end or not, but we've kind of talked about everything in a very linear fashion right now. We've talked about, you know, doing our research, then we do the wireframes, then we do design, then we build it. That is sort of a standard old school methodology, and people still do that kind of stuff all the time. I'm sure you guys have already talked a little bit about hearing Agile development and some newer methodologies of how people are churning out software. What we're talking about here are steps in a process. They can be applied to Agile methodology.
Mini for Agile or big for...
That's right. So today we're talking about a project that we did in more of a waterfall. And I don't want to go on a dissertation about methodologies, but you know, waterfall means this becomes before this becomes before this before this. Agile is done in much more of a cyclical manner where small bits and pieces are done along the way so that you can manage your development cycle toward different requirements and things like that. The concepts that we're talking about here can be overlaid in any development methodology that you want to go use. So I just want to make that clear for folks that have maybe already heard about Agile development or already doing it. This type of stuff can absolutely be overlaid on an Agile methodology.
Yep, and I'm sure you already know this, but from a user experience standpoint, that needs to dictate the actual product or service or app, not the technology, right? So the technology should essentially be transparent. The users don't care about how it's built or how long it took you to build it or how many changes you had to make in the code. They care about how easy it is for them to use. They care about how much they enjoy using it. They don't care about the back end. So that cannot drive your product design. It's definitely important to get development involved from the beginning, but the user experience and the design and the overall general experience needs to be driven by what the user is doing and what the user's needs are. Testing, of course, is something we do. Testing now on many devices. Gosh, when we started years ago, it was easy. You had like one browser or two,
Apple
and you
IIe.
tested. Yeah, and now it's like, does it work on Retina? Does it work on a Mini? Does it work on tablet? Does it work on the 75,000 Android devices? Does it work on? So you have to test a lot, and it's never going to be perfect on every single experience, but we try super hard to make it so. And we tried to make sure, you know, responsive. I'm sure you know responsive design now is a must. Mobile apps, not always a must, but at least it has to be working on your mobile. How many of you, just out of curiosity, when you're looking at a website or browsing a website, how many of you use your phone preferred or a desktop or a tablet? So if you use your phone mostly to browse websites. Okay. Tablet? Just your regular old laptop? Yeah. And from a shopping standpoint, when you do online shopping, phone? Tablet? Desktop. Yeah, yeah. That's pretty much what
I want to be sure you get it right,
Yeah,
right? I mean, you're
yeah.
more confident on a PC
Yeah.
that what we are seeing is what the real experience is supposed to be.
Hi.
So, when you're having users test the product, do you have them bring their own devices ever, or do you have them test on like a standard computer? Or?
That's a
So
good.
I'm going to
Sorry.
repeat the question. So the question is, do we have test participants bring their own equipment, or do we provide it for them? That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. So the usability testing we do depends, of course, on what the target is. We have some websites or apps that we know we're only going to test on desktop. Some we need to test on tablet and mobile. And to your point, Android, iOS, depending on. We have those in the office, so we'll usually supply them. We use what the user is comfortable with. We try to. So if you're an Android user, obviously testing something on an iPhone is not going to go as well because you're going to have trouble with the devices. Now, we've seen that before because we have done, for example, we did some testing on tablets. They were going to be, the product was going to be on tablets no matter what. We saw that although the interface of the actual design was not the problem, this was an Android tablet, people had a really hard time just navigating the basic Android interface. So you have to factor that in when you're getting your testing results, that it may not be the actual product's fault, but it was the actual device. So we usually don't have people bring in their own, but we have all those devices, and depending on what the business needs are, we'll test all of the, to make sure we have the checklist.
Yeah, almost always we'll use our own. I mean,
Yeah.
it has to be a pretty special case because of the types of variation that you can have with people's own devices and how they have it set up and
And
everything
issues
else.
that they might have, and it might not be as fast. So yeah, but
Yeah.
we usually keep all those, and we know what we're testing ahead of time. So, but that's a really good question. Anything else? All right. Did you want to add anything to this? Before? All right. Oops. I was still on the slideshow. So once all this was done, and I can't find it now. There we go. Once all this was done, we had our final design. And our final design, which you have not seen yet, and I will reveal it now, which you will see sooner than later. Ta-da! Here we go, yay! Make it bigger for everyone. It's hard on this computer, sorry. So here we are. So what did we do? We obviously made it a little bit easier from the navigation standpoint. The college, the education, the research, the application. So you know where you're going. We still have your typical user types here. So if you know who you are but not exactly what you want, you can get to it from there. Are you a student, a parent, faculty, alumni? We've got a quick links that's going to offer a pull down so that you can get there, and of course your search. We've got news that'll be relevant news, events and announcements that you can go through. If you just want to learn about the school, there's a quick call to action here. This is just a more about by the numbers. As I mentioned, this is going to rotate different stats about the school that people are interested in. I don't know if these numbers are correct. 2,100 undergrad students, 75% of IST receive financial aid, things like that. That's going to sort of rotate through. Information about blogging, the blogs, to link you to that really quickly. Students go to work for great companies. This is going to be a carousel when all is said and done of all the good companies that people from IST come here for. And then, of course, you've got all your social links and your quick links. So a lot more simplified, a lot cleaner, less choices, but more of a focus to get to the information.
Yeah, and also it's worth noting that you know, one of the strategic goals of the college was to sort of break the mold from the typical what you see in most of the university websites. I mean, you guys are IST, right? This is your wheelhouse. You can't be out there representing the College of IST as you know, as anything other than
typical template design of a website.
Right,
you don't
right.
want that.
This has to stand out as a forward-thinking. I mean, albeit already 2014 design, but you know, it's modern. It takes into account a lot more of the modern design sensibilities than the previous one. You know, wall-to-wall big photos. You know, less navigation, more targeted. The
Less
types of things that you
content
see
on the
in a
homepage.
lot more in a lot more modern sites. And so you know, they wanted to get away from what you see when you just go to psu.edu. They wanted to really break that. And for us, that was kind of a fun exercise because, you know, if we were just doing another standard university website, that wouldn't have been any fun as designers. So I think they accomplished that. I mean, what do you guys think? Yay, nay, good, bad, okay? Yeah, okay, good. I mean, it tested well. When people really got to sit down and look through it, it tested actually remarkably well. So we're pretty happy with it. And hopefully it'll be showing up soon. Some folks.
It's in development right
still
now.
Yeah.
Obviously, the school is developing it, and then yeah, it should be live very soon, and you'll have to let us know what you think.
Go ahead. Sure. So it's a great question. I've been wanting to get my hands on that site for a while. So at Startup Week 2 years ago, we actually did a focus group with our class that we talked in to talk about the current website and what they wanted to do. As kind of a kickoff. They weren't ready to do that yet. About a year ago this summer, was it a year ago or 2 years ago now?
No, it was a year ago.
Year ago.
It was a year
so
ago.
A year ago, we got a call from the dean's office, and we came up and we met with them. So the whole process took us
About 6 or 7 months.
About 6 or 7
to
months
get it to
total.
development, and now it's
And that's fairly typical for a site this size.
With the testing cycles, yeah.
With the testing cycles, and also, you know, everybody's busy. So, you know, approval cycles can take sometimes longer. If we were to just sit down and bang this out as an agency, we probably could have built it in 90 days.
Well, yeah, and another big challenge that we didn't have to deal with as much, but is the content. Because in doing a new website and restructuring and reorganizing and trying to make it easier to digest and a little more current, you've got to rewrite a lot of the content. You've got to rethink a lot of the content. So on this end, that takes a while too to think through all of that.
That's probably one of the biggest considerations when you think about time, is the time that it's going to take your clients to do what it is you need them to do. We couldn't go in and write professors' bios. We can't go in and, you know, and be the voice of the university, but the people here have to be. And to get all those folks out of their busy schedules to write the content that they owe for the content is always going to be a challenge with any client. unless they have dedicated writers who are ready to work on that project.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And in case you care, it's being built in Drupal. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Drupal, but it's a really nice CMS. So how many of you are familiar with Drupal or have used it? Yeah, that's figured as much. So it's a good one to use for something like this.
Yeah, it's getting better.
It's pretty robust. So we have
What
4
time
minutes
for one
left.
more question?
Yeah.
Does anybody else have one last question? Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry, what type of data?
Quantitative or qualitative data?
Mostly qualitative. So, you know, focus groups and usability testing are all about qualitative data. That's about, you know, getting in depth on different actual topics. Now, if we were deciding to run what ad campaign is doing better, that's quantitative data, right? So you could run an A/B test on running an advertisement on a website and run half of it on, you know, 50 million hits and half of it on 50 million other hits, figure out which one performs better, and go with that direction. But that's quantitative. That's when you get a big sample and you're testing one or two things that you really want to understand. With usability testing and with talking to people about what their concerns and feelings and desires are, that's almost always qualitative for us.
Now with analytics,
like
with Google Analytics, you know, and that's actually something we should have mentioned in the start. You know, that's something else we look at with current sites is where people are going from an analytical standpoint, where they're going, where they're dropping off, which pages get the most views, which pages get the most drop off. So that is something we do take into consideration in the beginning. And most of the sites we build have either usually Google Analytics or what Omniture is now called, or, you know, some sort of analytics, so you can go back and see how it's performing. To answer your question, we did recently do an A/B test with someone. It was they were trying to get people to request more information for this specific product, and they weren't sure if the button should be here or here, and so they ran A/B testing to see which one was going to perform better. So that does happen. But as Keith mentioned, the usability and the focus groups are all qualitative.
And a quick note on that. So Google Analytics is great to find out where your drop-off is. So if you want somebody to go buy something and they're not, you can identify that they're not in Google Analytics. Then you bring them in and talk to them. You say, hey, you're not buying this. Why? That's where the qualitative comes in, so that you can piece together where the performance problem is and why they're not getting there. That we do a little qualitative research, you fix it, and you're on your way.
Yeah. Anything else? I think we're
No? Great. Well,
Great.
thanks for staying awake.
Yeah, thank you.